So glad you're here today. Come on, aren't you grateful to be in the house of God? Before you're seated, why don't you turn to somebody next to you and just say, hey, aren't you grateful for the blood of Jesus? And you can find your seat. What an honor it is to see you in God's house today. We don't ever take it lightly, and we're always just so grateful that you place such a high priority on being in the house of the Lord. Listen, I say this a lot, but it's true. I don't think any of us are ever going to regret being in God's house. We may regret a lot of things we do outside of God's house, but showing up to the house of the Lord with other believers, worshiping the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords is just something that I don't think we're going to regret. And so I'm glad you're here. What a joy it is to see you in the house of the Lord today. Just a quick, brief update. We've had a missions team in Africa for the last 10 days. They're on their way back to the States as we speak. And so they've had a wonderful trip. Yeah, being the hands and the feet of Jesus. I think they land in Austin sometime close to midnight tonight. So I know they're going to be wiped out. That's a long plane ride, boys and girls. My goodness. So they've had a wonderful time in Rwanda. Also, special announcement. This is exciting. I've been so excited to tell you this. Next Sunday, we've got free burgers for everybody. Hang on. I misspoke. We've got free burger parking for everybody. That's funny. It's bad when your own jokes make you laugh. As you guys know, next Sunday, God has opened up a really cool door through AISD and Burger Stadium right down the road. Obviously, we have a parking problem here. We understand that, and we're doing our best to accommodate as many people as possible. And so next Sunday, we have the Burger parking lot available, and we'll have shuttles from Burger to as close to the front door as we can get, enclosed transportation. So you'll be out of the elements, whether it's raining or cold or hot, you will be taken care of. So if you can help us with that, we would greatly appreciate it. You don't even have to drive on this parking lot if you don't want to. You can just drive straight to Burger, jump on one of our shuttle buses or vans, and we'll get you right here just to help alleviate some of the parking issues that we have. So thank you for just the hundreds of people that I know you're going to help us with that. We're so grateful. And if you're new to Christian life, we are on the tail end of a series that we've been calling Believe For It. Now, whether this is your first time, maybe it is your first time here, you probably already knew, you walked into the lobby and you're like, I've seen Believe For It. What is this by the time you've gotten into your seat today? Let me just kind of quickly tell you where we've been over the last several weeks. We've been in a series called Believe For It, where really we're just believing and trusting God for some big things. We're being bold and courageous with our faith. We're not playing it safe with our faith, but the way that we've kind of framed it is we are revving the engine of our faith, just believing God for some wild things. And so several weeks leading up to the series, we asked everybody to start prayerfully considering and thinking about what are the areas of your life where you need to see God move. What is it? What does that look like for you? And it's different for everybody. It may seem small or it may seem huge, but whatever it is, it's important to God if it's important to you. And so what we're asking you to do is write it down on the Believe For It cards. And then we had the first week of the series, we by faith walked out into the lobby and attached what we're believing for to the towers. And we've just been praying about those, and we'll continue to pray for those. And our prayer team will be praying for those as well throughout the year. And it's already amazing to see what God has done. And please don't, by this series, I don't want you to think like, oh, we can go attach this card to the wall and we can make God do a miracle. That's not how this works. And please understand, that's not our heart behind this. God's going to do what God wants to do whenever God wants to do it. And we don't coerce him into doing the miraculous, but what we can do is have giant faith, bold faith, to believe God for what seems impossible. And in my experience, I've seen God, when our level of expectation and our level of faith rises to levels that we've not seen, it's amazing how God seems to come through. And we've had some amazing testimonies already of what God has been doing, and we're going to celebrate some of those next Sunday during our Baptism Sunday. But if you still, listen, if you have a need today, there's cards out there. Write the thing that you're believing for down, and by faith, attach it to the towers, and we're going to trust God to do some crazy things. And speaking of crazy, the way we've said it, this is kind of how crazy we're asking you to go. Like, if as you're writing it down on your card, if it looks crazy after you're done writing it, you're on the right track. Good job. And I'm excited. I really am. I'm excited to see what God is going to do. Last week, specifically, we prayed for couples that are struggling to conceive. We've prayed for couples that are struggling to carry a pregnancy full term. And listen, I don't know the details of everything, but I believe God did a work last week. And I'm excited to see what God continues to do. And we're going to pray today. Really, at the end of every service, we've been praying for needs in a unique way, outside of the norm. Every once in a while, come on, whether it's your life, whatever it is, and it's the same church too, you got to get out of what you always do. You got to break the mold. Sometimes we can get too comfortable in our own, just in how we do things, that the Lord's like, man, you got to shake things up sometimes. Do things. So that's what we've done, is that we've just tried to shake some things up and do things outside of our normal flow. And today will be no different. We're going to end our time together today in a very unique way, where we're going to do our best to pray for every single person that has a need. And you'll see how that kind of plays out at the end of our time. But then the other component of this is we want to celebrate when God does it. We don't want to be a church that just asks God to do things, and when he does, we're like, well, that was cool. No, we want to celebrate and point back and give credit and honor where honor is due. So, yeah, come on, that's all right. And the way that we're trying to capture that is through QR codes. You can do that. They're on the TVs rolling. They'll be probably pop up here as well, but on the website as well. Just scan the QR code. Share what God has done. Whenever God chooses to do it, we want to hear how God has come through for you in a miraculous way. And so today, I do want to take you to the Old Testament book of 2 Kings as we start in the word of the Lord today. And what we'll find in 2 Kings chapter 5, we see this snapshot of one season in a man's life. We don't get a ton of detail about his upbringing or how his story ends at the end, but we do get a very detailed account of one incredibly pivotal moment in the life of a man by the name of Naaman. 2 Kings chapter 5 verse 1 starts this way. Now Naaman, commander of the army. That's a good title, commander. That's just, if you're going to put a title on some, commander, I like that. That's good. He was the commander of the army of the king of Syria. He was a great and honorable man in the eyes of his master, who was the king. Because of him, the Lord had given victory to Syria. And it says this, he was also a mighty man of valor. Now, in order for us to really understand the magnitude of what God's going to do in this story, I think we have to make sure we understand what we do know about this man by the name of Naaman. So here's what we do know. We know that Naaman was evidently a very powerful military leader. We know that he was the closest person to the king of Syria and to the outside world. People looking in and looking on at Naaman, he would have climbed the corporate ladder. He was the guy that did it. He had made it to the top, a position of power, a position of honor. He was well respected by his peers. This is the kind of person that Naaman was. I want to make sure that we put this framework around this because it's going to be very important in just a few minutes. The Bible also says that he was a mighty man of valor. which refers to someone who exhibits just a history of bravery and courage and strength, exceptional skill in battle, or amazing leadership abilities. This phrase was reserved for the likes of names like Gideon and David would be mighty men of valor. And Naaman finds himself amongst these heroes of the faith. Naaman would have lacked for nothing. Naaman was a man that women wanted to marry. He was a man that men wanted to emulate. When people looked at Naaman, people wanted what Naaman had. They wanted every aspect of his life because to the outside world, Naaman had it all together. Naaman, he'd be doing it right. And people took notice. But under all the bravado that was Naaman, under all the heroism and under all of the armor that Naaman would wear every day, that would prop him up and the allure that he had in society, under all of that was a slight problem. Naaman had a small problem. Now let me continue and finish verse 1. We already read that Naaman, commander of the army of the king of Syria, was a great and honorable man in the eyes of his master because by him the Lord had given great victory to Syria. He was also a mighty man of valor. But, I heard somebody preach one time, a long time ago, everybody's got a but. But a leper. Under the bravado of all that there was to this hero by the name of Naaman, there was a hidden issue. Something that he had tried to hide, something that he was trying to manage, something that not many people outside of his inner circle knew what was going on. But Naaman knew that there was a day coming in the future that because of what he was dealing with and what he was struggling with, he knew that there was a day coming in the future that everything he had worked for, everything that he had built, everything that he had accomplished hung in the balance of what he was dealing with privately. That if God doesn't do something for me in this hidden area of my life, then everything I've worked for is going to come crashing down. Because to be known as a leper would be meant to be separated from your family. To live in a colony with other people who were afflicted with leprosy. Everything about your life changed. It didn't matter what your title was. It didn't matter how much money you had in your pocket. It didn't matter how much fame and fortune you had. And Naaman knew that everything he had built and worked for his entire life was hanging in the balance by what was hidden under his armor. And if something doesn't happen, it's all going to come crashing down. I'm going to lose my family. Verse 2 tells us that the Syrians had gone out on raids and that they had brought back a captive. And I love how the word of the Lord describes her, a young girl from the land of Israel. And she waited on Naaman's wife. So mind you, they're in this inner circle, in private quarters, if you will. Not many people knew of what Naaman was struggling with, but she would because she tended specifically to Naaman's wife. So she would have been in a very tight-knit circle with the family. And she says to her mistress, verse 3, If only my master were with the prophet who is in Samaria, for he would heal him of his leprosy. And I don't have a whole lot of time to spend on this, so I'll move quickly. But don't miss the significance of what we just read. The Bible says that she's young and she's a servant and that she was taken captive, which implies a level in the natural, a level of insignificance. No position of authority, yet this young woman with no authority, no right to speak up, speaks up. And the power of a small, seemingly insignificant voice being able to set a massive miracle into motion. I don't know how seemingly insignificant you feel sometimes, but I want you to know your voice has power. That God can use you in a mighty way. I don't know what that looks like for you. You may be just a young child, but God's plans for your life. And what she could have held back on what she knew. She could have held back on what she could have done, but she understood that if I hold back on what I can do, then God just might hold back on what He can do. And so if I can offer help, I'm going to offer help, and we'll just see what God will do. And I love how God chooses to use ordinary people empowered by extraordinary faith to do supernatural things. God does it all the time. We see it throughout the course of Scripture. And she says, I know I shouldn't be speaking up right now. This might get me in trouble, but I'm going to take a step of faith. And I just want you to know, ma'am, that when you took me captive, there was a prophet back in my land that God worked through in mysterious ways. God did some crazy things. And this doesn't serve. If I speak up, I might get in trouble, but I'm going to take a step of faith. And I just want you to know that I have a feeling that if your husband can get an audience with the prophet, the man of God, that this private thing that your husband is dealing with could be made whole. So she speaks up. And now, having this information at his disposal, Naaman is forced to answer a very difficult question. And the question is this: how bad do you want it, Naaman? How bad do you want what you're walking through to be made well? Because it's one thing to say I want it, but it's another thing to say I want it and it's going to cost you something. You can say you want it, but when there's a cost, how bad now, Naaman, do you really want it? And the cost would be different than what some of us are thinking in the moment. The cost is this, Naaman: through all of your pomp and circumstance and all just the massiveness of who you are as a person, the warrior that you are, the image that people have in their minds of you, all the money that you've acquired and the status that you have in society and the power that you have. Hey, Naaman, are you willing to leave the comfort of Syria to go to a place that you deem as beneath you? Are you willing to leave the comfort of the palace, Naaman? Are you willing to admit, Naaman, as a mighty man of valor who's been able to take care of himself all of his life? You've been able to conquer, and people have looked at you as this strong. Are you able to admit that you have a need that you can't meet by yourself? Or do you have too much ego? Do you have too much pride to think, well, look how well I've taken care of myself in my past. I've been able to buy my way through things. By my power, I've been able to force some things to happen to where they would work out on my behalf. I've done it then. How bad do you want it, Naaman? Because deep down in your heart, Naaman, you know what you're walking through on this occasion. You don't have the power to fix it on your own. Hey, Naaman, how bad do you want it? And Naaman, verse 4 tells us that he went in and he told his master, the king, saying, "Thus and thus said the girl," which is funny. I feel like that's how I relay information to my wife sometimes. I don't remember the details, but it's kind of like this. There's a girl who said some information. She's from the land of Israel, and he kind of recounts what this young girl told him. And the king of Syria said, "Go now, and I will send a letter to the king of Israel." And so he departed, and he took with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 changes of clothing. Naaman, Naaman, Naaman. You're about to learn a very important lesson. That what you have need of, your money can't buy. You are in a situation, the thing that you've written down on your belief for it card, Naaman, you can't make happen on your own. And I know it's worked for you in the past. And I know you've been able to do it on your own strength. But Naaman, you can bring everything that you have. You can pack the wagons and you can march it over to Israel. But what you're going to learn in just a few moments is that you can combine all of that, but your power and your position and your money will not get you what you need. But nonetheless, brings it all. And then he brought the letter to the king of Israel, which said, "Now be advised, when this letter comes to you, that I have sent Naaman, my servant, to you, that you may heal him of leprosy." So now you have one king writing a letter to another king, saying that I'm sending my second in command to you. And it happened. When the king of Israel read the letter, this is funny, he tore his clothes and he said, "Am I God to kill and to make alive, that this man sends a man to me to heal him of leprosy? Who does he think I am? Therefore, please consider and see how he seeks a quarrel with me." Israel and Syria had been at each other's throats for a long time. And the king of Israel is now thinking, man, he's trying something on. He's trying, you're not getting me today. You're scheming and you're trying to do, what is he trying to slip behind my back here? So it was when Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes, that he sent to the king saying, "Why have you torn your clothes? Please let him come to me, and he shall know that there is a prophet in Israel." Now, this in my mind is where the story starts heating up. It starts to cook here real good. Verse 9, then Naaman went with his horses and his chariot. Again, thinking that everything he has, everything that he's acquired, all the status and the power and the fame and the money and the fortune, the mighty man of valor was going to be able to be the thing that brought his miracle to pass in his life. And he brings it all. And he shows up and he stands at the door of the prophet Elisha. Elisha, you can picture this. Just the story's funny when you can just see this playing out. This man coming with everything that he has. A man of strength, a man of power, is in a foreign land that he feels like is beneath him, and he comes up to the door of this prophet and he knocks on the door. And he's waiting on the prophet to come out and greet him. Verse 10 says that Elisha sent a messenger to him. This makes me laugh. And he tells him, "Hey, you, mighty man of valor. Hey, you You person who have been projecting strength your whole life, go and wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh shall be restored to you, and you shall be clean. Now again, this is too good not to picture. I don't want you to miss out on something that will make you laugh. A man of status. Just think of somebody in society who carries a lot of status. Shows up at your door, knocks on your door. He's expected to be greeted by you. And you send your child to answer the door. And this is exactly what happens. And he's not used to being treated like this. Look at what I've done. Have you not read that I'm a mighty man of valor? Have you not read of what all I've done and what all I've accomplished? And you don't even have the decency to come to the front door? Verse 11. And Naaman, you can imagine, becomes furious. And he went away and he said, indeed, I said to myself. Sometimes you got to talk to yourself. He just said the wrong thing here. He will surely come out to me. Who does this prophet think he is? And he will come out to me and he will stand. And he will call on the name of the Lord his God. And he will wave his hand. Like it's some hocus pocus magic. Who does this man think he is to not come to the door? He's about to come to the door. And he's about to come to the door, and he's going to stand there on his own 2 feet, and he's going to call on the name of his Lord. And then he's going to wave his hand over this area that I'm struggling with. See, I think Naaman is very similar to you and I oftentimes. See, Naaman had his miracle all mapped out. Naaman had a need just like you and I have a need. And just like you and I, Naaman had a plan and a way that God should meet his need. Well, God, okay. Let's do it this way, Lord. If you will have a conversation with my friend over here, you change their heart, and then once their hearts change, they're going to have a conversation with my boy over here. And then once you're done doing that, you see, Lord, how I've got all the pieces coming together. And now it's making sense to you, isn't it, Lord? See, sometimes you and I, when we're in need, we've already mapped out our own miracle. We've created a table of contents in a way. You've tried to give God an owner's manual of how to put back the pieces of your broken life. God, here's how I think you should do it. I don't think it should require much of me. I don't want to have a difficult conversation. So if you could just go ahead and deal with their heart, I'm going to be all right with that. And we got it mapped out in our mind how God should perform the miracle for you and I. You're going to show up now, Lord. Just go ahead. I put it on the wall. You see me put it on the wall. I had faith when I put it on the wall. Now go ahead, and I need you to do it right now. Come on, God. Go ahead. And Elisha doesn't even come to the door. You have the decency to show up to the door. Naaman, you wanted the pomp and circumstance of your miracle. You wanted it to be clean. You wanted it to be done the way that you wanted it to be done. And I felt compelled through this story today to remind you and I that oftentimes God's process is different than your preference. That God does things in ways that doesn't make sense to you and I. And we say this a lot, but you and I don't have the privilege of seeing the beginning from the end. We don't get the privilege of seeing how one thing, one miracle, one thing changing affects another thing that the Lord has planned to set in motion in your life. And so we can only see what we can see right in front of us. And so we just see a need, and God, I'm going to need you to do it right now. Go ahead. Woo, have your way. And we'll shout and we'll cry and we'll snort. God said, if you'll just trust what I'm doing. I know you know how you want it to look, Naaman, but if you'll stick with me, Naaman, I got you. I know you don't know that about me yet because you're far from the God that is working through Elisha to perform the miracle. But you're about to learn about me, that I'm never going to leave you and I'll never forsake you, that my ways are greater than your ways. You're going to learn this, Naaman. Naaman says, I want your wavy hand over me, prophet. And God says, go wash in the Jordan. Now watch, this is good because verse 12, watch how he responds. This is us sometimes. Are not the Abana and the Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus where I come from, aren't they better than all the waters here in this low life of a place, Israel? Couldn't I wash in those waters and be clean? So he turned away and he went away in rage. Because God wasn't going to do it the way he wanted him to do it. He took his ball and was about to go home. How bad do you want it, Naaman? Are you okay if God does it in a way that doesn't make sense? How bad do you want it, Naaman? Do you prefer your pride? Or do you prefer your deliverance, Naaman? Thank God he had somebody in his circle that was with him that had their head on their shoulders. And they come over to him, verse 13, and his servants came near and spoke to him and said, my father, if the prophet had told you to do something great, would you not have done it? Of course you would have. How much more then when he says to you, wash and be clean? And so he went down and dipped 7 times in the Jordan, according to the saying of the man of God. Now, here's where I kind of understand where Naaman's coming from. Because in the natural, if I'm dealing with a massive skin disorder, where it's eating my flesh away. I've got some open wounds on my body. Now, you may not be able to see them, but I know they're there. They're under all this armor that I've been projecting strength with. But under that, I've got some issue. I got some flesh wounds. And if I go to the Jordan, the Jordan is unclean and it's muddy waters. If I go and dip in the Jordan, it's going to make my situation worse. And so he starts thinking in the natural. He starts trying to use his finite mind to understand an infinite God. And he's saying, well, this doesn't make sense. Like, if I go to the Jordan, what I have and what I'm dealing with is actually going to be made, I'm going to get more infected. God says, how bad do you want it, Naaman? And then I think, here's how I think, right? I can't necessarily prove this, but he's a human being, and so he has human emotions like you and I would have. And if it were me holding the position of power and prominence and strength and wealth that Naaman had, as he's standing on the banks of the Jordan, here I am. You know there's a piece of him that absolutely wants to step into the Jordan, because at this point, man, I've tried everything else I know to try. And I know I've heard the stories of what this prophet has done, what God has done through him. And so, yeah, I want to be made well. I just don't know if I want to step in the Jordan to be made well. But he starts talking himself into it. All right, bro, you got this. Let's go. You can do this. People are around. People are watching. People are looking on. He's standing there and he gets in the first time and he dips in. And you know how our minds start messing with us. And he starts looking around. He says, what am I doing here? You fool. You are in the Jordan River. You are a man of power, prestige, and honor. People want to be like you, and you're dipping your hide in the Jordan River. Dips in a second time. The enemy starts to just talk in his ear. Just like that old enemy does all the time. Whisper to you, make you start thinking things that aren't true, believing things that aren't true. Look at all the people around you. They're judging you right now. They think you are a fool right now, Naaman. Third time, Jackson's still there. What are the people that are with me going to think? They're not even going to respect me anymore. I'm losing everything I've ever worked for as I'm dipping in every single time. I can imagine every time he was dipping, he had another thought that come through his mind as to why he should not keep going. Another thought as to why he should stop believing for what he's believing for in this moment. Family members say I'm crazy. Doctors' reports say there's no way possible. It's never happened in my family, so it's not going to start with me. We start going through a list of every reason why we should stop believing. Sixth time, before he goes down the seventh time, he says, oh, when I get out of this water, Elisha, I'm coming for you, bro. Coming for you. And he dips down the seventh time and he comes up. I'm sure he felt it. I'm sure he knew. I don't even know if he would have had to look. I have a feeling that in that moment, he didn't care what the people that were around him started thinking about him. I don't think in that moment when he came up healed and whole that he was worried about what his entourage or the people in his community were thinking about. Oh, he gonna go get Elisha, all right, but it's not to take him out. It's to give him a bear hug and to celebrate what God has done. I just want to tell somebody today, I want to encourage you before we pray today. There's some of you that have been believing God for the same thing for a long time. And the enemy is sitting on your shoulder whispering into your ear, why are you still believing for this? Why are you still praying for this? Do you really think God can do something? You prayed about this all last year and God didn't do it, you fool. Really? You think this God stuff works? You think he still does miracles? And I want you to know, don't stop praying. Don't stop talking to the Lord about it. Now, you don't need to carry the burden of it. Once you pray about it, you leave the burden of that to the Lord. But you keep sharing with him the desires of your heart. I prayed for my kids for 10 years. Some of you are saying this. And they have not come home yet. Don't stop praying. Don't stop before God does it. And I know it doesn't seem like it's going to happen in the natural. But God's process is different than your preference. God can do it in a way that you've never dreamed possible. Just stand with me. Our prayer team, board of directors, staff, they're getting in place. And here's how we're going to end our time together today. We didn't want to close this series out without making sure that every person that has has a need.